The Evergreen Show, taking your business from seed to sapling to towering giant. With your hosts, best-selling author and business growth experts Noah Fleming and Shawn Veltman. This is the only show that gives you proven, pragmatic, and immediately applicable business growth strategies every week in 15 minutes or less. Here's Noah and Shawn.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Evergreen Show. It's another fine day here in cold January, Ontario. Maybe it's, when are we posting this? Yeah, it should be January still. January, Ontario. It's a cold time here. I am looking forward to some March weather. Shawn, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. We've got a Chinook coming through, which for listeners who don't know, Calgary is right by the Rocky Mountains. So every once in a while we get nice warm air that comes over, and we get a warm up of about 40 degrees overnight. It's beautiful.
I thought, I always thought that was a saying that you're getting chinooked, but that sounds like a good thing.
Yeah, no, the way you say it makes it sound filthy, but I love them.
I am pretty sure there is a saying talking that you're getting chinooked. But anyways, let's leave it at that. So, Shawn, I've got a topic I want to talk about today. Maybe I've told this story on the Evergreen Show before, maybe not, but let me kick it off for you and we'll see where we go here. So I was having lunch with a client after a workshop with their sales team. So it's about an $80 million company. We had just finished a workshop with the sales force, the sales team, and he wanted to go for lunch. He was all excited. And he pulled me in at lunch across the table and he said, I have a confession to make. And I said, what's that? And he said, we don't follow up on any of our quotes. And I know I've told this story a million times other places, but I said, what do you mean? He said, really, we don't follow up. He said, the only way we know if we get the business is if we got the business. But we're quoting so much, we just don't know. We don't have the time to follow up. We don't do it. And so we're spending a lot of time doing this stuff. Everything's going out, but we don't know unless we get the business. And I said, okay, well, I can help you with that. He said, no, good news. We've got the problem solved. I've got quotes out there from a few different IT firms. We're looking to solve this problem. We got a few quotes back, one for a new ERP that was $280,000. Another one was $180,000. And so we're just evaluating the two of them. But either way, one of these is going to solve our problem. And I looked at it and I said, this may not be a money thing, but I can probably solve this problem for about 10 cents. And he said, what do you mean 10 cents? And I said, just give your salespeople a piece of paper every time they quote and ask them to check off a box. Did they follow up on the quote? Yes or no? And then you have a way of asking why. Now, that's a long-winded story to get to this point, in that sometimes companies are spending these enormous amounts of money to do things that could be solved perhaps more affordably. Now, we've talked recently about the importance of time, and this is not about saving time. This is about investing your dollars effectively to get what you need to get done. So, one of the things you and I have talked about, Shawn, is we've built tools for companies and our clients that years ago would have cost millions of dollars, perhaps very similar to these ERP systems that cost $280,000 that this CEO was considering using. We could solve these problems for far less affordable. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, first thought is that, I've worked in that space before, and $280,000 for an year, that might have been their first month or the trial version, but those systems are crazy expensive. A lot of times they're overkill, and they don't do what needs to get done. So for your client, and I'm sure you asked him this, but when they were evaluating these systems, the time thing really is the one that smacks me across the head, right? Because often you'll hear, oh yeah, it'll take them a year to get set up, and then we'll be in the clear. And you ask, okay, so you're an $80 million company. How much are you losing by being basically out of commission for a year? That's craziness. Now, if you could get it done in 3 months for 5 times the cost, you're still probably coming out ahead.
Well, I had, it's funny you say that, because I had another client, and again, without sharing any privileged information, these are clients that I worked with in the past where I've perhaps observed things. I've offered to help. I've tried to help. But, something is already going on. They've already invested this time. They've already invested this money. And so in one case, they had been working on a CRM for the Salesforce for 3 years. And it still wasn't launched. They were getting closer. And then there was this abrupt decision to almost start over from scratch with a new firm, but use the same tool that the other company had built.
Wow.
And to me, the whole thing was just ludicrous. These are the types of things, again, we worked with one client in particular where we had their Salesforce go from no tool, no process, no CRM to within about 30 days actively using it. And now we're 6, 8, 10 months later, it's still being used and it's become one of the most integral tools for that company. And so there is a speed issue here for sure, not just the cost, but I mean, the time investment there that this company had spent to not make any progress. To me, it was just baffling.
It really is, and I think one of the things that you and I see a lot in many different areas is it's hard to keep up. It's hard to know what the options that are available are. And, when you're running a company, it's not necessarily your job to keep up on tech trends or to understand what's available. But, that's where you and I add a lot of value, and people like us add value by being able to show, look, you've got this problem, and there's been some advances in the past 5 years or 10 years or 40 years in some cases that can help you solve it. Like I'm looking specifically with a client right now, and we're doing some prediction of churn. So new clients come in, and which are the clients that are most likely to not be here next month so that we can more effectively target them, market to them, and get them back on a path that puts them closer to our best clients. And, the technology to evaluate this has just become so much better over the past 10 years. I remember building systems 10 years ago, and it was ugly, and it was long, and it was labor intensive, and it was expensive. Whereas today, we can get stuff like this up and running in under a week and really start driving some great results for clients very, very quickly. And as you and I have talked a lot about, time is the most valuable resource. So speed to market, speed of implementation, and really getting stuff going, it's a great thing. But a lot of companies don't even know that this is possible, so they don't know to ask for it.
There's another interesting thing here, though, that I think is important that we touch on. It's that there's this fear of missing out because there are a lot of shiny new things being presented every day. I think one of the core points that we're trying to make, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we go into companies where there's often these fundamental pieces missing, whether it's a CRM or whether it's a tool that the Salesforce is using like a CRM, but they're using it incorrectly. Meanwhile, they're still adding new tools, new things, instead of asking the important questions of like, what do we really need to accomplish what we need to accomplish? What would really add some value to what we're doing? What would help us be more efficient with our time and invest other time elsewhere? I think that's important, a distinction to make, is that there is this fear of missing out on the next big shiny thing when in fact we don't have the fundamentals in place in the first place.
Absolutely. And I think those two really go hand in hand. It's easy to get worked up over what's popular or what's being hyped and miss the fundamentals of how is this going to help my company? What's my use case for it? How are we going to put it into place in a way that creates a better customer experience, that creates more customer loyalty, that drives more revenue? And a lot of companies spend a lot of money putting things into practice without being able to answer those questions or hand waving it away. And I don't know about you, but that's infuriating to me.
Well, there's so much that's infuriating about all of this, right? I mean, I was infuriated when he told me about the ERP system he was looking to put in place. I was infuriated when I saw the progress they'd made on this CRM, when in fact, we could have solved this problem much, much quicker. And to everybody's advantage, we would have been profiting from the initiatives we could have made. And so I think, again, it's important to often take this inventory and just to really be honest with yourself and ask yourself, again, what do we really need? What would really help us? What areas of the business are we struggling with? Where could we use new tools or better processes or more technology or better technology to help us do the things that we need to do? And I think, again, there's just this I don't know. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's following the herd. I don't know if it's a speed of implementation thing. I don't know if it's fear thing. I don't know. What is your feeling?
I think in many cases there is a herd mentality, and that's what leads to the one issue of, buying things that aren't necessary or aren't helpful. But I think on the other hand, there's so much new things coming up. There's so much that's being done that people don't hear about a lot, or people don't hear about outside of very specific contexts. So, you and I do some work in companies that takes us toward IT departments occasionally. And we'll hear people complain, oh, I've been telling them to do this for 6 years now and nobody's listened and It's so obvious they should have done X, Y, and Z. Well, it might be obvious to you, but if you can't communicate that upwards, then it's not going to get done. And it obviously wasn't obvious to the business leaders what the use case was or why it was important. So, I'm thinking specifically of things like market basket analysis. And for anyone who doesn't know, that's where you take a look at everything that you sell, you take a look at who buys what you sell, and you're able to figure out if somebody's purchased these 9 things, then the likelihood they'll purchase this 10th one is 98% greater or 500% greater than it would be them purchasing it from scratch. So that's where things like the Amazon recommender engine come in, right? You say, oh, people who bought these 4 things also bought the 5th.
Okay,
and it's a much easier sell. Now, that's obvious to people in that world, but it's not obvious to a lot of leaders that we've talked to.
So let me interrupt you for a minute there, because I think you're bringing up a really valid point, which ties a lot of this discussion together. So because I do want our listeners to think that I've got a point here today, and I think I do, and you've certainly got one. That technology that you just mentioned, right? The ability to do that. We've seen organizations that are A, trying to do that by hand, or B, thinking that what Amazon has done and how they've created that is something they could never do because that's Amazon's technology. And I think one of the things that's important is that technology was worth $50 million at one point, right? That was technology that Amazon developed, that they created. But that's the type of stuff that we're able to do for companies now for a lot less money. And that helps them really understand where these opportunities are. And I think that's the key thrust here, is that there's really no excuse to be left behind here, right? These are the types of tools that you can develop, you can implement, but you need to understand where you need them. And then you need to make it. I don't want to say you need to guess, but you need to make an accurate decision of, is this an area where we need to invest because this could really help us? That's the type of thing that we can do now. And that to me is incredibly fascinating.
And I think you're bang on there. It's, understanding either how to ask the question, or really, so much of what we talk about is looking at these things backward and saying, okay, so what could we do? Or if we could do this, it would really help our client experience, right? So, if we're looking at a sales team and, somebody says, hey, if we could identify what somebody wanted to buy without them having to tell us, we could offer it to them, and it would make their experience a lot better, right? Nordstrom used to do this by hand quite a bit. I'm sure they still do, but I remember being amazed in the early 2000s reading about how Nordstrom employees kept their little black books of every customer. And when something came in that matched something that they bought 6 months ago, they would call them, say, hey, this just came in. I'm holding it for you in case you want it. That's amazing customer service, but it's not something that you can't do today. And you can do it on a scale of every customer without having a person watching it like a hawk. Or you can do it cheaply, you can do it effectively. So having this idea of, if I could do X, I could make my customer's experience better, chances are X can be built for you. And it's just a matter of talking to people who can create it for you or find it for you. And, shameless plug here, I'll say Noah and I are fantastic at that.
So I think today, to me, that brings up the challenge here, which is look at your own business and look at the things you do and ask yourself, if you had a magic wand, or if there was something that you could do from your wish list that you think would be so extravagant, so out of the realm of possibility when it comes to learning more about your customers, learning what they buy, learning how they buy, learning when they're getting ready to defect or leave you, learning where the cross-sell opportunities are, learning when quotes are put out and not responded to. All of these things. Look at your business and ask yourself, if we could automate this, if we could build a tool to help us with this, if we could create some sort of technology out of thin air to do this for us, where would we want this? Because I think going back to your shameless plug, we can build this. We have built these tools, and this is getting a bit too shameless for my liking now. But this is the important question to ask: is if you had this want, and if you could create these tools, where would you do so? And what's stopping you from doing them? Because as we said earlier, there's no reason these days to be left behind. You don't have to jump to the shiny next big thing, but instead think strategically about your own company and your own business and where you could use these tools. Does that sum it up nicely for us, Shawn?
I think that sums it up beautifully, and really I'll make this really easy for everybody listening. If you're not implementing some sort of market basket analysis, if you're not implementing some sort of attrition detection tool, those are great places to start thinking about how to put that in place, or what would it mean to your company if you had that in place, right? If you could identify with a 90% likelihood that John Smith wasn't going to do business with you starting next month, what would you do differently to keep John there? How would you reach out? What would you as a company do in order to take advantage of that information? If your answer is, well, we'd let him go, then you probably don't need this tech. But if you would do something, if you want to keep John, then this is the kind of thing you need to be putting in place. And, I'm begging everybody, find a way to get it in, find a way to use it, because it's there, you can do it, and there's really no excuse not to have this kind of information and tactical advantage.
Well, I'm going to let it end there because I heard the mic drop. I heard it come through my headphones. That was it. Boom. You've heard the message. You've got the challenge. These are great times. There are wonderful opportunities. There are smart people out there that can help you. This ties back to previous podcasts about the best use of your time and where you need to make your investments. Think back to that CEO that I told you about at the start here and that story he mentioned to me. Do you have examples like this in your business where you're reaching over the desk and you're pulling somebody in and you're saying, I've got a confession to make. We don't do this. Because the reality is when I heard this, it was so shocking. It was so simple to solve. And by the way, the end result of that story is we did end up solving this problem for this CEO for a lot less than he was expecting to spend on those ERP systems. And this is the type of thing that you need to be doing. Shawn, any last words from you?
That covers it for me. Everybody, as always, do the challenges. We love hearing from you, your experiences with them. And I look forward to having our next discussion soon.
All right, folks, we will talk to you next week. As always, leave us your review on iTunes. Share this with your colleagues, your friends, your coworkers, your peers, everybody else who you think should be listening to the Evergreen Show. If you need to get in touch with us, visit noahfleming.com, hit the contact button, and we're just an email or a phone call away. And of course, make sure you subscribe to our Tuesday tidbits, which are read by over 30,000 executives every single week, packed with challenges, packed with stuff like this. We get emails every week saying these are the almost the agenda item on many executive meetings every week. And so use them, use these challenges, as Shawn said, and you'll see great results. And with that long-winded ending, we will talk to you next week.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to join us each and every week for another great episode of The Evergreen Show with your hosts, Noah Fleming and Shawn Veltman. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review, and we'll catch you next time on The Evergreen Show.